Symposium. And we're here ready to talk about tissue integration and essentially long-term aesthetics. And the key word there is really long-term. And the first session will address predictable factors for achieving success. Success is kind of a nebulous term. What do we really mean by success? So I think we need to define it in the context of 2012. Implant success in 2012 really means aesthetics. It's all about aesthetics. And when you talk about aesthetics today, you have to look a little beyond the white. You really have to look beyond the white because it's more than just looking down at some form of restoration on the top of the tooth, or sorry, on top of an implant. Really, essentially today, when we look at it, you have to understand the critical interface, and that is that the white is predicated totally upon the pink. In fact, when you look through this in retrospect, you will see that this beating is all about the pink. So, if we're going to replicate nature, we have to critically evaluate and then replicate these critical interfaces. There are essentially 4 interfaces in this process. We go from the face to the lips to the gum to the teeth, and then ultimately the teeth to the bone, in a cascading series of events. Obviously, we're not talking much in this particular session about face, lips, but we're going to move on and focus in on just the zone. Really, the zone where the teeth now meet the soft tissue and the underlying implant in the bone. So, if we're going to make this a science, we're talking about aesthetics, it has to be more than this kind of vague term. It looks pretty good. It has to be more than that, and we have to be able to evaluate the dental aesthetics. So we need to measure it, we need to quantify it, if we're going to make a science out of this beyond the art. So, we really need numbers. You need metrics to do this. And we're just beginning to get into this, because it's only recently we've been able to look at it effectively. Every other aspect of dentistry has numbers. We talk about 0.1, 0.2 of a millimeter. Do we do that in dentistry, in implant dentistry? So when we look at aesthetics, remember we talk about white and pink aesthetics. And fortunately, Belzer developed a white index. And what's so key for us today is the pink index, Friadent's index. Because this gives us a way to statistically evaluate just what these numbers are. Really so key because if you look at it, the top part of any restoration is totally dependent on the form of that soft tissue. So beyond matching color, what we have to do is match form. And the form is all dependent upon the pink. And if that pink is in any way aberrant, you can see you get all sorts of alternate tooth forms. And that's exactly what you don't want. So, we really do tend to focus on Friadent, and he really developed a scoring system for this. And you can get a maximum pink aesthetic score of 14, dependent on 7 variables, and this gives us the way to evaluate on issues. It's really, the important part about this is to evaluate objectively the outcome of any particular surgical or prosthetic endeavor, a particular protocol, and do it over the long term. Replicate that data and see just what's happening. Why do we need to quantify dental aesthetics? Because we need to know if there's a predictability to what we're showing you on the podium. You need to know, does this work all the time? And you want to know, how long does this last? Is there long-term data on this? And lastly, is it viable within the realm of your day-to-day practices? Can you do it in your office tomorrow? So long-term aesthetics is really dependent on that critical pink-white interface and the time involved in that. And nobody better to introduce this topic to you as we start at the very beginning, and there's obviously a term that we've all grown used to, osseointegration. And to do this, we have Professor John Davies. John is from Canada. He's a professor of biomaterials as well as biomedical engineering, but he originally, I believe, hails from Wales in the British Commonwealth, just like Nigel. And he's going to take us through the concept of not only primary stability, macro mechanical bonding of the implant into bone, but then the series of events that takes place thereafter as we develop endosseous wound healing and bone to implant contact through a series of events which we refer to as the phenomenon of osteoinduction or conduction, bone formation, and then ultimately bone bonding. So John, can we welcome you to the stage?